May 5th. Just a reminder to council members that before you speak, please state your name so people who know who is talking.
We can dial into the city council meeting now.
Dave, would you do the roll call, please?
Okay, roll call. Ms. Bourne.
Yes, here.
Mr. Coolman.
Corey Coolman, present by phone.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Materney.
Here.
And Mr. Matuzak.
Participant lines muted.
Counsel here.
Okay, Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith is present.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, please stand and join me in the pledge if you're able. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag
The flag of the United States of America and to the nation on which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Let's go to the next item, which is minutes of council.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do have the minutes here, and it has been distributed amongst the council members. I have not heard any objections to that, so Councilman Smith would like to move to approve the minutes of the city council meeting held on April 21st, 2020, and as written, and dispense with the reading.
Second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Thank you.
I realized
Was that
we
both
had
of
two
them?
different meetings, and I just did it in general. If there is not an objection, we can utilize that for both the meetings, I believe, since I just did it for the 21st. If I don't hear any, we'll just assume that that's for both meeting minutes.
I'm good with that. If that's okay with Laura.
All right. Do we have any citizens' concerns or special? If hearing none, we'll quickly move on to council or the administration's report. I have no report other than to note that the city will be distributing this evening to on social media and the news and local newspapers. Another brief statement from me, kind of updating people where we are on certain things, and thanking the community for their cooperation and efforts during the virus, and just also to acknowledge all the nice people who have done who have done so many nice things for city staff, bringing food, volunteering to make masks and those kind of things. It's all very appreciated, and we want to just acknowledge that. So, having nothing else, city administrator,
No report.
finance director,
No report tonight.
director of law,
No report.
president of council.
Thank you, Your Honor. I do not have a report, but I do have a quick statement I just would like to read here. So I would like to reiterate my gratitude to our community for how well everyone has been handling COVID-19. As I have traversed around the community, the members of Perrysburg have exhibited exemplary unity during this crisis. I couldn't be more proud to call Perrysburg my home. As we continue to trot through this new normal, I would like to continue to encourage our residents to follow the CDC guidelines of wearing masks in public, practicing social distancing, and continuing to wash our hands as often as possible. It is our patriotic duty to continue to practice these behaviors. We must also be cognizant that the masks are not there to protect us, but to protect those who we come in contact, whether it be our family, friends, neighbors, from contracting COVID-19 should we be an unknowing carrier. During this crisis, I would also think back to one of the most famous lines uttered by a president: "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." And I believe that line resonates then just as much as it does today. We must move through the fear that accompanies this virus and continue to selflessly help our family, our neighbors, our friends, and our community. We cannot let the fear associated with this virus paralyze us. I do also believe it's time that our economy begins to reopen. I have faith and trust in our residents and businesses to continue to be responsible throughout our new normal. I hope everyone will continue to patronize our local businesses to help the owners and their staff make it through this crisis. We will make it through this together, and we will come out better and stronger than before. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll turn to the committee reports. Finance and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mayor Mack and Jim Matuzak. I have no report. We have not met since the last city council meeting, and we will be meeting, right now we're scheduled to meet a week from tonight if there's anything on the agenda. Mr. Krebs, you're kind of making,
At this point, I don't know if we do, you guys were talking about the street tree assessments? Right, so we were gonna call you about that if you feel a need to run that through the committee or not, the annual street tree assessment.
street tree assessment, that's the only thing we have right now?
I think so. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only thing I know of at this point, so.
Okay, well, if that's all I'm not gonna cancel it at this point, but if that's all we have, just so everybody knows, we probably will not have it then, and we can address it at the next council meeting. If something should come up between now and then, let me know. So officially, it's not canceled yet, but we'll put out plenty of notice if we're gonna cancel it. So next meeting is tentatively scheduled for a week from tonight, pending anything for the agenda. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilman. Service Committee.
Jam attorney, we did not,
Motion.
sorry, I can be real loud. We did not meet last week, 2 weeks would have been, anyway. But I do have a resolution, 26-2020. I would like to introduce the resolution and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only, and dispense with the second, third reading.
I'll second. Or Jonathan Smith will second.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
thank you, Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Resolution number 26, 2020, accepting the proposal and authorizing an agreement with Campbell Mechanical Services Incorporated for the purchase and installation of a heating system for the Perrysburg Municipal Court in an amount not to exceed $56,864 and declaring an emergency.
I have discussion, Mr. Mayor. This is Councilwoman Deborah Bourne.
Thank you. Well, we'll let her move for passage first, and then we'll open up for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I move that resolution 26-2020 be passed as emergency amendment.
I'll second. Jonathan Smith will second.
Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was noticing as I was looking at this, I found it interesting because it's $25,000 over the budget that we don't currently have. We only have $100,000 in the budget, and it looks like we're buying a new system with a backup system, and I'm wondering why we're buying two. It's kind of like almost buying, when you buy a car, you want to buy a good car rather than buying two good cars. You want one that runs. So I think that we should be reducing our expenditures because of the COVID-19.
Hold
So-
on. City Administrator was going to address that question.
Good evening, Council. This is Administrator Cabot.
Bridget, would you mind speaking up a little bit?
Certainly. Usually that's not a problem. So anyways, what you have before you is a quotation from Campbell Mechanical for $56,864. That is the complete system, including a backup boiler. In the event that the boiler would go down, there would still be able to have heat in the courthouse. In your packet, you will notice that there is a second quote, an older quote, for essentially the same system. Since the original quote came about, we have been in contact with Campbell, who was able to reduce their cost by approximately $12,000. And this is due to some federal funds that they are receiving, and they are able to pass that savings along to us. So the resolution before you tonight is one resolution, a main boiler, a backup boiler, for the cost of $56,864, in which we had budgeted $100,000 for that project back when we were doing the amended budget.
Thank you.
Okay, I would also like to add that since the governor has now reduced the state revenues as of today for the next 2 months at least to $775 million, who knows, it may be billion, I don't know, million is what I understand. Why are we assuming that we don't even know where our expenditures are going to be or where our revenues are going to be by June yet? Due to COVID-19, due to people losing their jobs, that kind of thing. That's kind of concerning to me. I'm not saying we don't need a heating and air conditioning unit, but I think we need to go back to get someone else who can do it within our budget.
This is Jim Matuzak. Ms. Cabot, does this quote, does it include air conditioning? Because she might have a point, putting in a new furnace for heat in the middle of May or the end of May.
This is usually the best time to get the price,
Yeah,
but
this is actually the best time to put in a boiler is when you don't need it, when you're getting ready to go into the cooling season.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually for the heating season and the heating system.
So it's just heating, though?
Correct.
Okay.
Ms. Cabot, if I recall as well, was the AC unit replaced above the municipal building?
This
couple
is
years
for
ago?
the municipal courthouse, and that was replaced just a couple years ago.
Okay.
It's separate units.
And as I understood with the questions that were asked is, this is for $56,000, which is $44,000 under budget, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
any other discussion? If not, I'll call, or Dave can call the roll. City clerk, call the roll.
That would be me. Okay, roll call on resolution number 26, 2020. We'll start with Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
No.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next meeting for the service committee.
Jan, you're gonna have to, so they can hear on the
I
telephone.
keep hearing you on the phone over there.
I keep forgetting. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
Next meeting for service committee, unless, we'll just leave it for now, is May 20th at 5:30.
Thank you. All right, the safety,
22nd? 27th.
27th,
Yes.
May 27th.
Yes.
At what time?
5:30.
5:30, thank you. The safety committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Barry Van Huzen, and I have no report. Our last committee meeting was canceled. We have one scheduled for May the 26th at 6 p.m. if there are items for the agenda. If not, we will notify. I do have a resolution to read, and we will hold discussion until the motion is made. But I do just want to, since I have the floor, and I know the administration has started to address this question, that is our governor announced today, and then the city of Toledo's announced, and the school district has announced certain layers of reductions in spending. And I know we're still formulating what actually we may lose through revenue, but as the city looks forward and thinks of a 10% or a 20% reduction, whatever that may mean, what that would do to our spending. So, and I know you're working on it, but I look forward to hearing what those numbers will be.
No, that's a very fair question. We haven't publicly said anything, but yes, as soon as the governor made the announcement basically that everybody should anticipate drastic reductions in funding, which we also acknowledge, we started the process of planning for next year's budget to be reduced by a significant percentage, and also during the current year, even though items are budgeted, if those costs can be postponed until things are a little more clear, for example, if we need to buy a truck and can wait till the third or fourth quarter to buy that truck, we're postponing those kind of expenditures at this time. But we'll make a report to council. That's a very fair request.
Well, and I know it's speculative as how much revenue will be reduced, but we need to know what we would be cutting.
Right.
So, and I know you're looking into it. So,
No,
Would you like me to talk about the?
Sure, Dave.
I mean, one of the things we did right off the bat, Barry, and you may remember from the last council meeting, was we reduced the pay down on the fire station. our annual general fund budget is roughly $20 million. It's a
Right.
little bit more than that, but it's about $20 million.
15%.
We just held back on $3 million, which is about 15% of our budget right there. If we need to, we have about $4 million in a rainy day fund that we can draw on, which is another 20% of our budget. Okay, and I know Tom and Bridget have sent around instructions to all the departments to basically rework their budgets in the event that we need to reduce those budgets by another 20%. When you start doing the math, we have a lot of contingencies in place.
Yes.
So,
And I just wanted that to be public.
yeah, I understand, right, and that's kind of what I'm doing here right now,
Thank you.
too. Right, thank you.
Well,
Appreciate it.
Dave, Councilman McCarthy, has Steve Bronder, our tax commissioner, has he finalized April income tax?
Yes.
That we, I mean, I think all of council knows, but finance committee reviews
Just again,
that
for the
every day.
record, right, the April tax collections came in a little over $2 million, which is about half of what we usually see in April. But we have to, it's hard to make a comparison because, again, the governor moved not only the tax filing date back to June, is it?
July 15th.
July 15th, sorry, thank you. But they also moved back the first and second quarter withholding deadlines to July 15th. So we really won't be able to have any kind of rational comparison until we get past that July 15th date. And then we can start talking about how we really are comparing to, say, last year. But, like I say, the raw numbers, we brought in about half. We brought in 2 million versus 4 million that we usually bring in. And that's without a tax deadline of April 15th. So.
Mr. Krebs, do we have any gauge on, I mean, we know who our taxpayers are. Do we keep track? Do we have 20,000 taxpayers and 10,000 have filed returns and made payments, so half of the
Yeah.
people had filed, so that do we have any way of tracking that? Just to,
I do think Mr. Bronder would be able to run reports that would give us good information, but I have not
Okay, 'cause
heard
that
anything
would-
specific.
that
Right,
might help a little bit.
right. I mean, I know he mentioned, the thing that's gonna take the first hit, so to speak, is withholdings. Those are the things that come in closer to real time, and I know, those I think are down a bit as expected. But other than that, we won't know net profits. We may not really know until 2021.
Well, the net profits are going to be based on the 2019 calendar year, which was a good year for everybody.
Exactly. So we may not see, this actually may have a bit of a hangover.
Yeah, it's going to be this time next year.
Right,
Yeah.
that we will see that come through. So, there's components that'll hit at various times along the timeline. But for right now,
This is Councilwoman Deborah Bourne, and I would agree with what Mr. Van Hoosen said. I think we need to start looking at making cuts, various cuts in the budget, and I don't think we should be waiting.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to introduce Resolution 27, 2020, and move that the rules be suspended to allow for its reading by number and title only, and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second.
Roll call, please.
okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes, and I will have discussion when it comes to me if the mayor would call upon me at the right time.
Okay.
okay, Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes.
Thank you. Resolution number 27, 2020, accepting the proposal and authorizing an agreement with Acumed Billing Incorporated for the provision of EMS billing and collection services for the Perrysburg Fire Division.
I move that Resolution 27, 2020 be passed.
Second.
Discussion, Councilman Coolman.
Okay, I was just trying to get a clear picture of, it seems like this was something we handled internally before, and now we're giving out a percentage of the collections. Am I understanding that correctly?
You want to take it?
Good evening, Chief.
evening, members of the council. This is Fire Chief Rudy Ruiz. Yes, what this would do would take the place of the providing the billing and collection services that we currently do now. However, the position that takes care of this right now is a part-time position, and the revenue actually would be a savings for us as opposed to a deficit. By that I mean, instead of, there are a lot of things that we pay into by taking care of it ourselves, and as opposed to having someone else do it and just taking a percentage from the top. So overall, the percentage being 5.95 is very favorable to us, mainly because there's a lot of other things that go along with the responsibilities of billing ourselves, i.e. there's a lot of federal rules, mandates that we have to make sure that we are well aware of and updated on an annual basis, if not semi-annual. Those things, as federal government typically does, it changes regularly. So we have to make sure that we follow those mandates. If we do not, or if we miss something, then we could be in a lot of trouble, not just financially, but legally. So it would be to our benefit.
Okay. All right. This is Councilman Corey Coleman again. Just wanted to check. I didn't see any of the numbers that kind of showed that the percentage that they're taking would actually increase our revenue as far as cutting costs that we may spend in mailing out collections, things like that. So you gave me exactly the answer I was hoping to hear. I trust that you did your due diligence here with the recommendation, but always want to, trust but verify.
Absolutely.
Sort of thing. So thank you for your answer.
This Councilman Matuzak, I guess the discussion on this will be a little bit more involved since we didn't go through committee, so this is kind of like the committee discussion that we're having right now. And Corey, I agree with you. I've kind of highlighted all kinds of things in here, and one of them was it's the 5.9% of the billings that Acumed does. I guess before I piggyback off of what Corey had asked, Chief, you had mentioned that there's, quite a burden of complying with governmental regulations. Have we had a history of not being able to comply with them?
No, not at all. We've been doing very well.
Okay.
However, the part-time person has indicated to me that she plans on retiring next year, and to have something, there is times where she falls behind, and when it comes to billing in the past, she has a difficult time catching up, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So it's every year it gets more and more challenging for the individual. So
has the impetus for this been because we have a part-time employee retiring and we don't want to have to hire and retrain somebody?
No, the impetus is because right now she's currently not working. We are not doing any billing right now. Yeah. So that was, and it wasn't something because of COVID-19. This is something that I wanted to present when I first started here because I've always worked for divisions that provided billing from an outside agency. I thought it was more beneficial. I thought it was more thorough, if you will, and also gives us an opportunity to generate revenue.
Okay, if I'm on the safety committee, so if this would have been brought to a safety committee, I would have asked to actually see your cost-benefit analysis of having done this. And like Mr. Coleman has said, he doesn't see anything in here because it's presented as a net expenditure. There's nothing mentioned in here. Well, I'm looking at the draft resolution and then the contract that the resolution relates to. And obviously the contract's not going to have our cost-benefit analysis in it, but I haven't seen anything. I don't know if by passing this resolution, if the fire division is going to save $5,000 or $50,000, or if it's going to cost us an additional, we don't even know what it's going to cost us other than 5.95%. We don't know what that number is going to be other than what we have in the budget. We can take 5.95% of the $600,000 that's in the budget. I don't think COVID-19 is going to keep us from achieving $600,000 in billings for EMS. Nothing's going to take it up, I would think, because there's going to be a higher demand for your service. But you've said that it's a net revenue generator. Are there any projections of increased collection percentages because someone's going to be doing it other than us? Because, someone that's dedicated to this has a higher collection ratio by hounding people for the money or having ways and means of doing this because it's what they do for a living professionally. And so we could just, based on that alone, pick up some revenue. I mean, has there been any type of projection on the savings that this is going to generate for the fire division and for the city? And if so, can we have those?
Yeah, I can provide those for you.
Okay. I don't know if you're expecting us to vote on this tonight, but that's one of several things that I'd kind of like to know before I voted on it. And this isn't an emergency, is it? An emergency measure? No? Okay. Okay. So I'll hold off on my other questions. That was just to kind of piggyback off of what Corey was talking about. I'd like to see what you've done. You usually do a really good job of scheduling that stuff out, and I'd kind of like to see what it is that we're going to...
This is Councilwoman Bourne, and I think that both Councilman Matuzak and Councilman Coleman had some good suggestions. Chief, I would like to see what Toledo and Sylvania, how they do with this system and how it benefits them.
Sure, we can provide a summary on their satisfaction level.
Thank you.
I will say that most of our neighbors, actually all of our neighbors, are using a third-party company. I know that Perrysburg Township uses Medi-Account Management at 7%. Rossford uses Cardinal Professional Services. I believe theirs are around 12%. And Northwood uses Great Lakes Building, and theirs are at 7%. So it's not out of the ordinary. How is it going to be different for us? I'd have to demonstrate that for you so that you can see it in black and white.
My concern would be, since that percentage is so much lower, are we getting something less than the others that are paying 7 and 12%? Or are you just a great negotiator? Because it's the lowest percent. I mean, that's a good deal. And here we are we're discussing how to cut costs because of the situation, and you're presenting us with something that will actually cut costs, if not increase revenue. So that's I'm not trying to hold something up that's going to be a benefit to the city, but since this is kind of like my opportunity on the safety committee to vet this.
Understood.
That's all I'm really trying to accomplish here.
I will tell you that when I was given the direction by the mayor to demonstrate what reduction would look like, I also stated that I'll also provide options on generating revenue to see what we can do to, instead of cutting, what we can do to increase. We won't be self-sufficient. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there are other opportunities out there that we haven't been taking advantage of. Let me give you an example. Car accident on the highway. Sometimes the accident is so devastating we have to bring in a helicopter and medevac to get in and haul the patient out. We don't charge anything for that. Most departments do. So, and that's usually paid for by the insurance companies for your automobile. So you're actually paying for it already. We don't charge for it. That's one example. So there's a number of other examples we can utilize when we use this company or any company to say we're going to start doing that. Obviously, we're going to need your approval to do those kinds of things. Also, for non-residents, again, an option to generate revenue, and I can show you what those numbers would look like based on a ballpark of or an average of what everybody else charges. We are very low, and when I first came here, I made that suggestion right off the bat. We're very low. We charge a very low fee.
Did you make that suggestion to the safety committee, or did you make it to someone other than the safety committee? Because I have not heard that before.
I made it to my boss, who was the chief at that time.
Okay.
And he made it very clear that the city wasn't interested.
Okay.
So.
His current boss hasn't said that.
No, and the fact that you've asked him to read, I appreciate that. You're doing a great job.
Councilwoman Bourne, if I may, are we going to be tabling this until we get more information then?
Well, we're not done with discussion yet. Maybe we can better answer that question at the end of the discussion phase.
I think once we get through the discussion, we can see what council's prerogative is.
Right, and I mean, if the majority of council still wants to vote on and pass it, so be it. Corey, did you have anything else you wanted to question? I don't want to steal the floor.
Councilman Coleman here. I would like to see more information. I'm comfortable with the first reading tonight, and then potentially suspending the third reading suspending the third reading at the next meeting after the second. But I would like that information to review kind of the cost-benefit analysis and what revenue we may generate. I think is a great idea before we move forward completely with it.
May I suggest?
I too, as Councilwoman Bourne, agree with Councilman Kuhlman and Councilman Matuzak. And as a fellow member of the Safety Committee along with Mr. Matuzak, I think this is a good idea to get more information. And I thank the chief for what he does.
Well, may I make a suggestion? Certainly, we're more than happy to provide information to council. We think this is also one of those things that we've been doing internally, and we've always done it that way. And we've always had the part-time person billing out. And this is will allow the department to focus on what its primary function is, and not spend time in leadership chasing bills. So we have no problem getting more information to council, but would council mind if we do that we pass it as an emergency measure next time? It was not intended to be passed as an emergency measure. You'll have 2 times to discuss it, and then we can proceed forward with actually executing and beginning that process sooner. So it's kind of a win for both. You get more information, and we get to start a little sooner.
Right, I was going to say you get
Councilman Kuhlman here. I completely agree with that strategy, because I would like to implement, especially if it's going to generate revenue, make that effective as immediate as possible once we have that information.
And I would concur. I'm good with that. I think that's a great suggestion, provided the information suggests that we do it.
Correct. So assuming passage.
Yeah.
Right, that's very fine.
Okay. Does anyone else have any discussion?
No, I think that's the direction we need to move. I just encourage councilmen and councilwomen to forward their questions to the chief to make sure that the questions are answered at our next council meeting. So
I've still got some discussion questions, if that's all right. I mean, and they're
absolutely
directed both at the chief and with Ms. Alkire here. Is it okay if I continue?
Yes.
Page 2 of the contract, section B. It starts out with the responsibilities of Acumed, and it says providing training and materials to customer, which is the city, acquiring software, setting up accounts, and otherwise establishing those procedures needed to enable the city to provide emergency medical service billing data to Acumed, and to enable Acumed to provide the billing services described herein. Are these providing the training and the materials to the city, acquiring software and setting up accounts and all this other stuff that they're going to do? Is there a cost associated with that over and above the 5.95%? So when you get to the exhibit and the list out where you're supposed to have the cost of all this, and says none provided, that's because there are none, or because none were provided?
That's correct. Currently, we are paying for those services, for the software and so forth, all the things that they mentioned.
No, I know, but if we were to execute this contract, maybe this is for Ms. Alkire, are there costs above and beyond the 5.9% of billing just getting set up and going that aren't articulated in there, other than just saying that there are things that need to be done?
No, that's correct. Other than there are certain steps that are necessary to get the project going. And I'm sorry, this is Law Director Laura Elker. There is nothing over and above with that 5.95%.
Okay. And then in section C on that same page, just below B, you get into the responsibilities. It's typical, you get into responsibility. I'm not trying to play lawyer here, but this looks a lot like, this is probably a guy that used to be a CPA and decided to go into a billing company because it's like an engagement letter. And where he sets forth the responsibilities of the customers, the cities, he immediately goes into what Acumed's not responsible for. And they're pretty much not responsible for anything, including the performance of the people with the city that provide Acumed with the information that they need to do their job. But yet they're responsible for training our people to provide them with that information. So are they or are they not responsible for adequately training our people so they can provide them with the information that they're supposed to? Because we're denying responsibility for that.
Yeah, so what I think that's important, when you look at the section C that's being referenced, what's important is when they're referring to the documentation, The information that the fire division will be providing to AccuMed will be those reports, EMS run reports. Then AccuMed will go through and code those reports based on the services provided and bill the insurance, Medicare, or the customer patient appropriately based on what that coding is. So where they're not taking responsibility for the accuracy, it's the way that the EMS report is written, they're not taking responsibility for how one of our medics is writing that report. They're just going to provide the services based on how those services are written out in the report. So that's where you've got to look at where they're not accepting liability or where they are. They are responsible for any reckless or negligent actions that they may take. Also in the business and business associate agreement that is attached to this, they are liable for their cybersecurity and protection of all private protected data, things like that.
So are we going to have people on staff that are going to be required are we going to have somebody on staff that is the contact or the point person for the city to work with AccuMed?
Yes, and I would defer also back to the.
Because we're losing our part-time person, so is somebody, who's going to be responsible for that if that person's going to be gone? Because there's still going to be someone at the city that's going to have to funnel all the information to AccuMed accurately, because they're not going to be responsible for any of this stuff.
Right now, one of our fire captains is responsible for dealing with that. It would still be a sworn officer within the fire division, I would think would be that point of contact.
So somebody is currently responsible for that,
Yes.
and that same person or someone equivalent to that same person will continue to be responsible for that function?
Yes, that's
Okay,
right.
okay. When you get to the term of this, I find this, I don't know, you tell me, Ms. Malkire, it's a 3-year term beginning with the effective date of this agreement, and then it automatically renews in 1-year terms, apparently into perpetuity, until either party wants to terminate it. But, council members come and go, we're approving the agreement, and I don't know if does council lose any type of oversight over this arrangement once we allow you to enter into this? Because it doesn't say council can terminate it. It just kind of goes on forever, and you do an outstanding job, Ms. Alcar. We haven't always had people that pay attention to the contracts, and we end up in a bad situation. It just keeps going on until somebody decides to terminate it with the city.
So
I think it might be more appropriate to have a 3-year term, and then it can have 1-year, 2-year, renewals.
I
But
can
subject
say
to council voting on doing
there's
that.
Ohio law, basically governmental entities can't enter into contracts into perpetuity.
But this doesn't have a termination, though.
Yeah, but there's a law that says governmental entities can't do it. So even if the contract doesn't say it, there's a bar from.
Right, but at some point, so that's.
So
Thank you.
it's like I don't remember the exact years, but I think it might be either 5 or 10 years where you can't go, a governmental entity automatically can't keep renewing something. So there has to be a bid process, the procurement process. So there's laws about the procurement process under state statute.
So let's just say for purposes of this discussion, it's 5 years. So then it can only renew for 2 1-year terms before it has to come back to council.
Right, it can't go on forever without coming back to council.
But, okay, so can somebody find out what that is for our next meeting so that we know we're not giving you a 20-year agreement?
Correct, and what we can do, so this is in front of council because the annual projected cost is going to be over $25,000, right? Annual projected based on your 2019 revenues puts us somewhere around the range of $35,000. So it does have a 3-year term. It renews for automatic 12-month terms, successive after that, and then it has the termination clauses upon notice, 90 days to 30 days that you can end up terminating it.
Yeah.
So I will tell council, and for the information of the public that's listening, internally we have started a contract tracking process within the city by department. It's housed in the office of the mayor and city administrator through their administrative assistant who works then with me on logging every contract. Every contract is then set up with a tickler date of expiration based on contract amounts, based on departments, so that they can be annually reviewed and determine, when they're up, when does notice have to be given for termination. So that's something we started last year. And one of the things that we could do with these types of contracts is always come back to your committee. This would have gone in front of the safety committee, give a status report 1 year, 2 year, 3 years in, however the committee, whatever the committee would want. And that gives council, at least through your committee structure, the ability to make a determination as to whether or not this is a contract worth
Well,
pursuing.
as this is written, actually, kind of looking at it a little bit further, it's 3 years. Because of its budget amount is in excess of my authority, it can't be renewed without coming back
That's
to
correct.
So the
council.
1-year renewal,
It has to come back to council.
okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I think we've done that now with a couple of contracts where it was set to re-up and we.
So it doesn't automatically renew, it automatically renews subject to council approval.
In their terms, it automatically renews, but we can't pay for it unless council allows it.
Okay, perfect. Just so we can get that on the record.
That's
So
a fair
that-
question.
so that's not that I don't trust anyone here, but.
Right.
It's Councilwoman Bourne. I do have one quick question. I'm wondering why we couldn't possibly hire a person internally to do that specific job.
What specific job?
Well, I think you're talking about the position.
Which would be billing. Well, the obvious thing is just billing for the fire department and the EMS.
Well, this is usually, this is Mayor Mackin, this is a choice by the fire department, but I've always supported it. First off, these companies are in the business of doing that, and instead of having to pay an employee and the costs associated with that and spend the time and the training, and if that person's out on vacation, who does the billing, following up those things, you have an entity whose sole purpose is to perform this process, which gets more complicated all the time, given federal regulations and how especially related to healthcare and those kind of things. Add to that then the cost of having the equipment and the training for that, and also that these people get paid based on what they collect and have the incentive to make sure they're doing those processes. So I think from the strategy wise, and also hiring that person in the fire department is not the fire department's core mission. I'm pretty sure that the chief would rather be making sure his fire department is working as best as possible to serve the residents of the community as opposed to collecting bills. If that's not correct, please let me know. So I think that this is
If I could,
a better choice for the administration. At least that's our recommendation to council.
and this is Councilman Kuhlman, just to add to the sentiment there, when we're getting into collections, we also have to factor in the litigious aspect of it. So if you hire someone internally, they can do this billing and they can send out the collection letters, but you actually still will need someone that is barred to go through the court proceedings, which I believe this entity offers that service as well, to follow through with the collection process in the civil litigation.
Corey, I
Category.
think they send it, after they've exhausted all their remedies, they send it to a third-party collection agency.
Yeah.
I think that's what's in the contract anyway. So,
Got it.
So Corey, in other words, they're gonna punt if they can't collect it.
Any other discussion?
I got a
Oh, I'm
couple
sorry.
more. Yeah, if I go to page 4 of the contract, section E, it says, in the event customer requests an on-site visit, all out-of-pocket expenses incurred in connection therewith shall be paid by the city upon receipt of an invoice from Acumed. Can this be set up without an on-site visit, or is this going to be some of those costs that are going to pop up? And if so, do we have something in the budget in anticipation of this having to happen? I mean, this is kind of like, it's like a back door for them to come in and,
I'll defer back to Chief Ruiz, but I
Okay.
don't believe that anything here requires the on-site visit, as we're currently anticipating everything's being done remotely.
and if that were to happen, do we know what we're going to be charged? Is it $500 an hour or $100 an
We
hour?
would
or-
certainly, before we arranged for any on-site visit, we would want to have those figures. I don't have those figures.
Right, I can appreciate that, but we might not have a choice. We might have to have an on-site visit in order to continue, at which point we're at a disadvantage when it comes to negotiating, because we don't have a choice. So I think it would be nice to know before the next council meeting what they typically charge for things like that, just so we know. Not because it's going to change whether I vote on it, but it kind of holds them to something going forward. And under payment and collection, 4A, it says an amount equal to 5.9% of the amount collected each month for EM services based upon an annual billable run of 1,600. How was that determined, and how does that impact what we're being charged. Is that our run volume, Chief? 1,600 a year, or what if in year 4 it's 2,200? Is the rate going to go up, or do we keep the 5.95%? I mean, they made it a point to put that in there, that it's based on that volume. I'm just curious what that even means.
Good evening again, Council. This is Bridget Cabot. My understanding is that our run volume is somewhere, for EMS runs, is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,200 to 2,300. So this is probably a standard model for them, basing it on a guaranteed number of runs
Minimum runs.
in order to guarantee us this low percentage collection fee. But
Right.
we are steadily in the 2000s.
So it's
every year
based,
for EMS.
so if I understand your explanation, then it's based on an annual billable volume of at least
Yes, that's
1,600.
my understanding.
Right, that's my understanding, the rates goes
Yeah,
up
I'd stick that
down.
at least in there if that's the intention of having that there. If that's the floor amount we gotta have.
That is the understanding of my conversation with them
Okay.
Via phone conference call with myself and Chief Ruiz.
Okay. And then on page 5, the top paragraph B, what are we at, we're on 4B. It says Acumet shall invoice city on a monthly basis for the services provided under this agreement. Invoice shall be paid within 30 days of the date of the invoice. 2 questions stem from that, because the next one is, in the event Acumet receives more than one payment, you guys can all read it, but it says Acumet agrees to refund the customer the amount it receives that is in excess of the amount Acumet is entitled to under the terms of the agreement. 2 things. They make it clear that when they bill us, we have 30 days to pay them, but they don't give themselves a limitation on when they have to pay us back if they get more than they're supposed to. I think we should have a 30 days on that as well. And then this kind of, the question I get from this, I thought I read it, maybe it was in the PowerPoint. They get paid just like this state of Ohio gets paid and the Central Collection Agency from collecting our income taxes. They just retain their fee and then give us our piece later. Isn't that how this works? They collect, they retain their fee, and then give us the net amount?
That is correct.
Is there a time when when would we not give them their money in 30 days because they get it immediately? They get it the day it's collected, they're paid. Isn't that correct?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Okay,
Yes.
so if they retain it, or they get it immediately, I'd like to put some pressure on them. If they get paid too much, they gotta give us our money quicker than, they don't have a time limit. They just have to give it to us. They could give it to us a year afterwards, I don't know. So I think we should put something in there for that. And then I guess that makes 4C kind of a moot point, because they're never gonna be able to charge us interest, because we never have to pay them anything.
Well, I think you have pointed out at least one other area where Acumet could potentially be invoicing the customer for services, say in the event that they maybe appeared on site and did some trainings and might have owed money there. But other than those situations, yes, I would agree with you that they are retaining their portion and they would just be passing on their portion.
Okay, because it says they shall invoice us monthly, not in the event they invoice us, but they shall. So I don't know, I just wanted some clarity on that. I guess they could invoice us nothing every month if we don't incur any additional expenses.
This is Bridget Cabot again. I think one of the items that could fall under that category is they do offer the use of their own billing software, reporting software that ties into their billing software. So you could acquire that and lease that from them. What we currently use is ESO software that we're paying for as a standalone entity. Well, this software that we're currently using imports directly into their billing software. So we are not in need of a separate report collection software, but you can lease that or purchase that from them. So that would be one of the items that they're referring to.
So it would probably be something that we would use, right?
Well, we would continue using the software that we are using, ESO software for our CAD reporting. And then all they do is they do a data dump, export it from our system right into theirs for the billing piece.
Okay.
I have a question that piggybacks off of yours.
Go ahead.
This is Councilwoman Attorney. this kind of piggybacks off of what Jim was saying earlier, Councilman Mr. Zach was saying earlier. They don't pay us on time, but if you look in the next paragraph, see, if we don't pay them on time, we're paying interest. Is
Oh, I know.
that correct?
Just heard.
Guess who provided the contract?
Yeah, but we don't, for the most part, though, we don't really pay them. We're not they're billing on the users of the service. They're
Right.
billing.
The way it reads, you would think that they're gonna send us an invoice for their
Right, but that's
5.95%, and that's not the case.
That's not the case.
They're just gonna retain it, so we're never
I mean,
gonna,
they're kind of using the customer in several different terms here. There's the entity that signs this contract, and then there's the customer who is the person who uses our fire department and is provided the service. That's,
I just kinda threw the word city in there so the people that are listening know what I'm talking about.
yeah, I understand.
So yeah, you're right. And then lastly, if you turn to page 6 of the contract, section 6B, Acumed will have the right to terminate this agreement, which may in Acumed's sole discretion be effective on any date, including immediately upon delivery of notice thereof to customer, if customer defaults on its payment obligations under section 4. Is there a similar or comparable provision in here that provides us the same privilege of doing exactly what they want to be able to do in the event that they default on any of their responsibilities or rights, duties, and obligations? And I mean, I don't think they would mind having something in there. It's only fair that both sides have the same.
Parallel clauses.
Yeah,
There is, and
Yeah.
underneath the term, underneath section 6, so what you cited was section B, 6B.
Correct.
We also have default clauses in A. Either party has the right to terminate the agreement upon 30 days' notice if there's any default of material obligations among the parties. And yes, so the difference between A and B is an immediate clause, while any default, which is fairly standard in any contract, if a party defaults on a material obligation, you have to give that party notice to cure the breach of that default. And if they can't cure it, then the contract ends.
So if you were legal counsel to Acumed, why would you have advised them to put B in there in addition to A?
Because at that point, Acumed, who earlier in the contract has 5 or 6 different services that they could be providing to customer under this standard agreement, if customer isn't paying them, if I'm advising Acumed, I'm saying, well, if you're not getting paid, you have the right to walk away under the.
Wouldn't that be covered under 6A?
It could be.
Right, that's why I'm not a lawyer, so I'm curious why B's in there. Because it's kind of, I'm just curious why B is there for them. There's not, if C is reserved, it's blank. It seems to me like it should almost be that we have the same, it was removed almost. That's just the way I'm reading it, so.
Okay.
So you're saying we don't have to worry about that because we're covered under A?
You do have rights to terminate if they breach on any of their material obligations under A. It's not an immediate termination like Acumed has under B, and that's solely reserved for non-payments by customer.
Okay. All right, so I guess that's it for me. If before the next council meeting, I could have the chief's cost benefit analysis. And I think, Bridget, maybe, I think you answered this when I asked it, where we came up with the 1,600 and.
Correct.
And just-
We'll follow up on that
yeah,
as well as
because-
all of your other questions.
Yeah, I mean, they probably need to have at least 1,600 to make it worth their time to do it. That's their minimum amount. But I'm just curious where that comes from. So that'd be it for me.
Any other discussion?
So I'm assuming that we're going to be tabling this for the next meeting. Is that, I'm wondering if we'll take a motion to withdraw the item, since it's on the table right now.
Yeah, because under the mayor's suggestion, we'd actually implement this sooner if we were to do that and do it as an emergency next time.
We'd have to withdraw the motion, because right now we do have it on the floor to pass.
Yeah.
So
Make a yeah.
I'll make, Jonathan Smith will make a motion to table.
second.
Discussion? Roll call?
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
That concludes my report.
Thank you
This is
very
Barry
much.
Van Huzen.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Chief. All right, we'll move on with the agenda. Recreation Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilwoman Deborah Bourne. I currently have no report. There was no PrAC meeting that was held on May 4th. They canceled it. We have no legislation this evening, and I will say that on May 12th at 6:30 so far, there is going to be a Recreation Committee unless otherwise other events happen.
Very good, thank you. Planning Zoning.
You're welcome.
Tim McCarthy, I have no report. We have not met. We are scheduled to meet on May 13 at 5:30 p.m. And I'll be in touch with Brody to see whether we're going to go ahead on that date or not. And then I'll let all of you know if we're meeting or not.
Thank you. Personnel Committee.
Councilman Kuhlman here. We did not hold a personnel committee meeting last month, so there's no new business. Next meeting looks like it's going to be the regularly scheduled meeting for May on May 26th. And we'll see if we have any agenda items for that. Nothing further.
Thank you. Public Utilities.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is Councilman Smith. There is no report as there was not a meeting in the month of April as well, as you see a trend. Our next scheduled meeting is on May 27th at 6:30 p.m. And at this point, it is still on unless we end up not having any agenda items. I do have one motion, as everyone had received an email regarding a motion to approve a sewer billing adjustment. I am going to go ahead and make that motion here at this point. So I would like to make a motion to approve the sewer billing adjustment for 10866 Bay Trace Drive in the amount of $1,686.96.
Second?
Discussion.
Yes, I do have a question for
McCarthy, second.
Council President Smith. I was noticing on here about the information about Bay Trace. I noticed that it's in the township, and having looked that up, and the amount is for $1,686.96. I saw a little bit of information, but I was wondering if maybe we could have been given more information by Ms. Godsey about what's going on with this whole situation.
Miss Councilwoman Bourne, in the email, what had been stated is that there was a break in their water sump pump, and it had actually been dye tested and confirmed that it was a water backup sump pump that had actually led to the higher than average billing, so they had to wait 1 full year to get an idea what the average billing was going to be, since it was a newer home, and the amount ended up coming out to be $1,686.96 that was charged for the water going into the sewer that did not actually indeed go into the sewage system. And so that's where that adjustment came into play. I do know from that email, and I'm going off memory here, I don't have it in front of me, even though I could probably pull it up here, but that the Northwest Water Sewer District is also a party of this, and that once we make this motion, that would be notified to the district, and they would be making an adjustment in the same kind as what we have done as well.
I do have a quick question on that, Councilman Smith, Council President Smith. Could you tell me, do they also pay for the city sewer as well as the township? Meaning the Northwest Ohio Water and Sewer?
So there's
I guess that's
my understanding, and I would have to get a little bit more technical details from Alice or Ms. Cabot here, but there are joint lines that are connected in different points as to where the billing occurs. So there are times where the water and or sewer are jointly connected, where it starts out in the district and ends up in the city system. And that's ultimately why there's a joint billing in there as well.
Dude, that's pretty.
okay.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
No.
Well, hopefully in the future we can do a better job of making sure this kind of thing doesn't happen again.
Well, the other unfortunate thing too is with switching to the monthly billing, we only typically have to see adjustments of over $1,000. So with the monthly billing, we shouldn't hopefully see these happen as often.
Thank you very much.
No further discussion or roll call?
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
thank you, Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further business under public utilities.
Thank you very much. Before Councilman Kuhlman says something under business, I will forgot to report earlier that we have been notified by the 180th Air Fighter Wing that there'll be a flyby in Perrysburg this week. We're not sure of the day. There's a little confusion about that, but he'll be flying up a Perrysburg resident, and he'll be flying by Perrysburg around 11:30 this week. Councilman Kuhlman?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I was contacted, and some of you may know this, I used to work in the prosecutor's office a couple times a week, but one of the issues that I ran into while I was there, so a while back I bought a electric scooter. It's one of those stand-up kind that you can get in bigger cities. Until now, I wasn't going to bring it before council, but China Pfeiffer, the prosecutor, and I don't know if she's ran this by you, Laura, but one of our police officers was stopped by an individual that was looking to buy an electric scooter. This one happened to have a seat, so it's a little different than the stand-up scooters. But there is kind of a gap when it comes to these types of vehicles in the Ohio Revised Code, where they kind of fall into a gray area of whether it's a vehicle, whether it's an assistive device, kind of like an electric wheelchair, and questions as to whether they can be driven on the roadway or the sidewalk, what's preferred. So I would like Safety Committee or Council as a whole, as we get to the summer season, to consider taking local action to classify these vehicles, to give our citizens direction on where they should be riding them. Some of these vehicles, like for instance, the scooter I have, I think goes 15 miles an hour to stand up. But in order to be a vehicle or a moped, a lot of times it's gas powered. It has to be above a certain horsepower. But we should really look into classifying some of those vehicles to give our citizens guidance on where we want those vehicles to be ridden in regards to public safety. So I would really like to pass that along to Safety Committee to look into, because it was a question I had myself earlier, and I dove into the issue while I was in the prosecutor's office, and there's really not a good guidance for it. I know the city of Columbus, when they brought in the Bird scooters, which is a scooter rental service, they had to tackle the issue. I believe they have some legislation that includes it, so that they have to ride on the streets and bike lanes, and they can be actually classified on the local level for OVI operation, things like that, if people are driving those while intoxicated. But I think that will help our officers and our citizens interact in those types of situations, because there's really not a clear answer right now. And I don't know if you have a comment on that, Laura, or whether you've heard about that, but I would be interested, if you do, to hear from you.
This is Laura Alper. I think the only comment I have is I am familiar with the legislation that Columbus passed. Cincinnati passed something very similar, and it did have to do with all of the electric scooter rentals and the birds that they were dealing with there. So certainly we can look into it. I've not spoken with our prosecutor on that issue, but that's something we can add to the Safety Committee agenda and explore it further.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yes.
Mr. Coleman, Councilman Matuzak. So you have one of these scooters that operates at a top speed of 15 miles an hour? Is that
I
correct?
do. I like my toys, Councilman Matuzak.
I'm assuming you brought it up because you have one. Do you have are you leaning a certain way on how these should be categorized? So the people on the safety committee I don't have one. I don't know if Barry has one or if
I do
Deborah
not.
has one. So we're not familiar with them. Do you have a way you're leaning on what
Correct.
they should be categorized as?
Really, I would defer to the police on their opinions on similar vehicles. Right now, I believe Perrysburg, and we're working towards this, the multi-use paths and things like that for bicycles, but it gets kind of complicated when you have something that is motorized. And more vehicles are becoming electric in nature as far as their motors are concerned, which is where our revised code is lagging. So right now, I would feel completely uncomfortable from a personal standpoint, and I really don't want to focus on how I necessarily feel personally about it to drive the conversation.
Yeah,
But our roadways
that too,
aren't
actually.
set up in a way. Yeah, our roadways aren't set up in a manner where I would feel comfortable, even wearing a bike helmet or something like that, operating it on the side of a roadway going 15 miles an hour, even in a 25-mile-an-hour zone. I think it's a better vehicle for sidewalks currently or the multi-use path, but I could totally understand how an individual on a multi-use path wouldn't appreciate seeing a motorized vehicle on it. It's really kind of a hard question to answer, and it might become more clear if we become more bicycle-friendly or alternative vehicle-friendly in Perrysburg, and I know we are trying to tackle that issue as we do construction on new roadways and things like that.
Okay. Do you have pillion riders on those?
Can you say that again for me?
Do you have passengers on those, or are they made for one person?
They're made for one person. I personally will take my son around, and I live in a subdivision, low traffic. I'll take my son on the front of it and make him wear a bicycle helmet. But it's generally going to be one person that it's made for. And then you also have, you have kid scooters. So Razor would be a brand where they have kids electric scooters that are self-propelled. That goes slower than that, probably closer to 10 miles an hour, that the younger kids are going to be riding. So you kind of have to be careful with the classification because I know personally I wouldn't want my nieces or nephews that are about the age to ride those on a roadway with vehicles because they would be hard to see. And quite frankly, I would just like to keep them in a separate area from cars and trucks.
That's what I wanted your opinion on. Thank you.
Councilman Coolman, we have several streets in Perrysburg that are not as busy that I would think that you could probably ride your scooter on, such as Cherry Street and streets of that nature. You could look into that and just ride on them now.
All right,
Absolutely. What I'm trying to
why don't we bring this back to that's something we're going to look at, and we'll bring to the safety committee.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there any other business for council? If not,
Councilmember Smith will make a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you. Good night.
You were really quiet.
Yep.
Tim?
Okay, so
We got to end it. See,
No, another one I might have to do is the next